your dream alive. Gonna keep it with mine. But I'm no good for you, I suppose. When you get a call back, you still hold me close at night.
Well, Australia is very unique. First of all, it really is at the end of the world. I mean, if you look at us on the map, you can't go much further unless you get to, obviously, Antarctica or New Zealand. And that means that you have to really punch above your weight in almost everything you do, because everything is harder. You are further away from everybody. You are more isolated. Everybody flies more or less the same aeroplanes. We fly pretty well to all the destinations everybody else has. So what is it that you can do to make yourself different? And when you look at it, there's really only two things. One is the customer service element, and that's very important, but that's also very easy to copy and follow. But the one thing that you can lead with is design. Something that is so attached to you that no one else can steal. And that's where design really comes into itself. And that's why we've gone to extraordinary lengths, obviously with Mark and Peter Morrissey, but when you look at the wonderful job that Colette Dinnigan has done for us, and also Akira Isegawa, who's a wonderful designer, and I think everyone will acknowledge that. So I think we're pretty fortunate to have a very, very strong team that helps us build that design identity that I believe no one can copy. It's ours.
We come from generally a pretty harsh environment, and so Australians have had to be fairly resourceful in order to A, survive and then flourish. So I think that's reflected in our designs. They're not overly fancy, they're fairly simple but relevant to the need that's there. Surfing is strongly connected to the Australian identity because the majority of people in Australia live on the coast. Australia, I guess, has also been fairly fortunate in having some wonderful surfers come through. We've had many world champions. That Australian designers now are becoming more confident in themselves and are happy to do things their way. Whereas in the past, maybe they've tried to just look at what is happening in Europe or what's happening in the US and try to follow that. But now I think Australian designers are saying, no, we can do this as well as anyone, and they're going out there and doing it.
I think what makes Australian automotive design quite unique is the fact that the market here is so fragmented. From the last count, we have something like 59 different brands here in Australia, which means that the consumer base is actually very receptive to fresh products, which means that the designers are actually embracing all of those products as well. So we're fresh with our ideas, which translates into fresh designs.
I believe that Australian designers and Australian design is different. There is a marked difference between the way design is taught here compared to, say, the US. There's much less of a specialisation. The way that we live and entertain, the food the access that we have to enormously varied and fresh foods and cuisines, from all over the world, has given us, I think, a very fresh take on people's lifestyles, on the kitchen and what people are eating, the way they're entertaining, and that for us brings a very unique take on how we develop appliances.
I think Australian designers are different because they've been forced to work with lower budgets. So they become more resourceful in what they do and how they do it. And then that coupled with low-cost manufacturing, we're able to create a powerful solution which is globally competitive.
The things that make Australian design iconic are very difficult to define. For some time, Australia had a White Australia policy which kept us very monocultural. But over the last several years, it's been changing incredibly. We now have a very, very diverse population. And if you look at our population, in fact, it reflects, in some cases, the trading partners we have.
Well, I think, you know, the interesting thing about Australian design is that, first and foremost, we're European. The bulk of the country's, you know, built around the, you know, European immigrants. And yet we're Australian, and we live in this most unusual southern hemisphere, beautiful, light, fabulous lifestyle, a lot of integration with the beach and the countryside and so on. And so we're no longer European, but we have that European sense of design.
Australian design is much broader in its interpretation of the word design. We go well beyond styling. Typically, we take on functions that are in other places regarded as engineering, so that here the designer has a much broader responsibility for the product.
I think we tend to challenge authority pretty readily, and I think that's something that you see very much in the way that we design. Perhaps what makes us strong as designers as well, that we don't mind challenging the status quo. Plus, you know, Australians are just so goddamn lovable that, you know, everyone wants to work with us and employ us as designers as well, right?
This is the first day of my life. Swear I was born right in the doorway.